When I collapsed at my graduation, the doctors called my parents. They never came. Hi. My name is Natalie Parker. I am 24 years old, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The day I received my bachelor's degree in computer science from UCLA after 4 grueling years of hard work. But the path to this moment was anything but easy. In the final months before graduation, while my friends were busy planning parties, taking yearbook photos, and mapping out their long summer vacations, I was nearly collapsing under the weight of unpaid tuition bills. I worked both morning and night shifts at a small coffee shop on Westwood, standing on my feet for 8 hours straight, my ears buzzing with the grinding of coffee machines, my mouth forcing a polite smile for every customer. At night, I opened my laptop in the cramped dorm room, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion, taking on freelance programming jobs just to meet deadlines. Every line of code I typed felt like lifting a stone, but I couldn't afford to stop. If I slowed down, even for a moment, the little money I earned would slip away, and I had no other choice. My body began to break down. The sharp headaches came more often, and my vision blurred every time I stood up too quickly. My roommate, Rachel, begged me to rest more than once, but I only gave her a faint smile. I knew I didn't have the luxury of rest. If I didn't push myself, no one else would take care of me. I only had myself to rely on. I thought that if I could just make it to this milestone graduation, holding that degree with honors in my hands, then all the pain of the last 4 years would fade away. I would finally prove, to myself and to the world, that no matter how long I had been underestimated, I was worthy of stepping into the light. The graduation ceremony was held in the university's Grand Hall, decorated brightly with blue and gold banners, UCLA's signature colors. Hundreds of students in black gowns and square caps stood in long lines, their faces glowing with joy. The sound of applause and cheers from their families and friends filled the air, echoing like crashing waves. The atmosphere was saturated with pride and excitement, a kind of warmth I had never felt from my own family. I sat in the row reserved for my department, clutching my graduation cap tightly, my heart racing. In my mind, I kept replaying the image of my parents driving up from San Diego, my mom filming every moment on her phone, my dad stern but with a glint of pride in his eyes. I told myself that no matter how busy they were, they wouldn't miss this day. It was just a 2-hour drive, they had to be here. When the announcer called my name, Natalie Parker, computer science, summa cum laude, the hall erupted in applause. I stood, adjusted my gown, and walked across the red carpet toward the stage with a smile. The spotlight beamed down on me, my chest tightening with emotion. I glanced quickly toward the audience, searching for a familiar face, a comforting presence. But in the row reserved for my family, there were only cold, empty seats. No father. No mother. No one at all. My heart sank, the air seemed to vanish from my lungs. I tried to swallow the pain rising inside me, whispering excuses to myself. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe they would arrive a little late. Maybe. I kept walking across the stage, forcing a smile to stay on my face. The dean of my department reached out and handed me the diploma I had bled and cried for. But the very moment my fingers brushed the edge of it, a violent wave of dizziness crashed over me like a tsunami. My heart pounded wildly inside my chest, each thud so fierce it felt like it would shatter my ribs. My head spun, the stage lights blurring into blinding white spirals. Every face in front of me dissolved into warped, smeared colors. The sound of applause stretched into something strange and distorted, as if from another world. I tried to open my mouth, to say, "I'm fine," but the words caught in my throat. My breath seized, my body trembled, and my legs gave way beneath me. Then, before the horrified eyes of hundreds of people, I collapsed on the stage and fell headfirst into the abyss of darkness. In those last fragments of awareness, only one thought pierced through. Why, even on the most important day of my life, was I still standing alone? The first sound I heard when I opened my eyes was not the cheers of celebration, nor the voices of my parents calling my name, but the cold, steady beeping of a heart monitor beside my bed. The ceiling above me was sterile white, the fluorescent lights faint and unkind, the sharp scent of antiseptic searing into every breath and burning my throat dry. My body felt as heavy as stone, my left arm flaring with pain as I tried to move it, only then realizing a needle was lodged deep into my vein, connected to an IV bag swaying from a metal stand. It took me several seconds to gather myself, to finally grasp the truth. I was lying in a hospital bed at UCLA Medical Center, the closest hospital to campus. A calm, steady voice made me turn my head slightly. A middle-aged man in a white coat, a medical staff member, was checking my vitals. When he saw my eyes open, he gave a small nod. "Natalie Parker, can you hear me?" My throat was parched, my mouth dry as sand, so I could only swallow hard and nod. He continued, his voice carrying a trace of hesitation. "We called your parents. They said they would come, but—" His words trailed off, his eyes dropping to the chart in his hands before he gave the faintest shake of his head. He didn't need to finish. I already knew. My parents weren't coming. A coldness seeped into my chest, sharper than the IV needle piercing my arm. I fought against the lump rising in my throat, gathering what little strength I had to reach for the phone on the bedside table. My fingers trembled as I opened my contacts and pressed the call button for my dad. The dial tone rang in my ear, long and hollow, until finally the voicemail answered. "This number cannot be reached at the moment." I clutched the phone tighter, trying my mom next. The result was the same, an endless ring followed by silence. My heart pounded, not from illness but from a wave of panic laced with fury. In desperation, I called Vanessa, my older sister by 3 years. The ringing filled the room, a spark of hope flickering in me only to be snuffed out when no one picked up. 3 calls, 3 times abandoned. I let the phone slip from my hand onto the bed, my vision blurring with tears. In that moment, childhood memories surged back. The empty seats where my parents should have been during school performances, the countless times they skipped my events to show up for Vanessa. History was repeating itself, only this time it was far crueler. I had collapsed at my graduation, my life on the line, and still they chose to stay away. The door burst open, and I flinched. For a fleeting second, I thought it might be a miracle, that my parents would finally walk through. But it wasn't them. It was Rachel, my dorm roommate, her hair hastily tied back, her arms full of bags, a small box, and my familiar phone charger. She rushed to my side, breathless from running. "Natalie, oh my God, you scared me half to death. I heard you collapsed at graduation and I came straight from class." She dropped her things, pulled a chair close, and grabbed my hand. Her palm was warm, while mine was ice cold. My voice broke, my eyes blurred with tears. My parents. They didn't come, Rachel. They wouldn't even pick up the phone. Rachel froze for a moment, then her expression darkened, a flash of anger flickering on my behalf. She squeezed my hand more firmly, her voice steady and resolute. "Don't think about them anymore. I'm here. I won't let you go through this alone." While the nurse came in to check on me, Rachel unpacked the small box she had brought, a clean set of pajamas, a toothbrush, the little notebook where I scribbled down programming ideas. Those simple things made my eyes sting. She wasn't family by blood, yet she remembered every small detail of my life and brought them to me, as if to remind me that I still had an anchor. That night, Rachel stayed by my side, even though I told her over and over to go get some rest. She pulled her chair close to the bed, her head resting against the armrest, jolting awake every time I stirred or gasped from the sharp headaches that wouldn't let me go. When I opened my eyes in the stillness of the hospital night, I saw her slumped in the chair, brown hair falling across her face, breathing softly in sleep. And for the first time in my life, the painful truth hit me with clarity. It was those not bound to me by blood who stood beside me in my weakest moments, while my own flesh and blood disappeared as if they had never existed. Tears streamed down my cheeks, soaking into the pillow, and this time I didn't try to hold them back. I let them fall freely, blending with the steady beeping of the monitor, like a mournful song of truth. And deep inside, a new fracture carved itself into my heart. perhaps it was time to accept that I could never expect anything from my parents. The only person I could rely on was myself and the rare friendships that proved to be real, like Rachel. Lying in that hospital room, staring at the pale white light reflecting off the ceiling, I couldn't stop the memories of my childhood from flooding back. It all played out like a slow-motion film, scene after scene, and in every one of them there was always Vanessa, my sister, the pride of the Parker family. We grew up in the suburbs of San Diego, in a house with a red tile roof and a front yard where my mother tended to her rose bushes every morning. My father, Michael, was a civil engineer. He always wore light blue shirts, silver-rimmed glasses, and spoke in a low, gravelly voice. My mother, Linda, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, gentle but constantly consumed by her shifts. And then there was Vanessa, 3 years older than me, the dazzling jewel in their eyes. From the time she was little, she was beautiful, lively, brilliant, and involved in every activity imaginable. Every photo hanging on our walls seemed to have her in the center, smiling radiantly like the poster child of a perfect family. And me, Natalie, I was always at the edge of the frame. From as early as elementary school, the comparisons became the shadow that haunted me every day. I remember clearly one parent-teacher meeting in 3rd grade when my teacher praised me for being diligent and creative in my writing. My father nodded, then turned and said, "Yes, but when Vanessa was in 3rd grade, she won 1st place in the whole district." His words were like a tiny blade, no blood, but a pain that lingered. And those cuts kept coming, again and again. When I scored a 95-inch math, my mother smiled before saying, "Vanessa got a perfect 100 at your age. Why can't you try a little harder?" When I told my dad I had been chosen for the school debate team, he replied, "Vanessa was already captain when she was your age. No effort of mine was ever enough to be recognized. I studied, I worked, I exhausted myself, but all I ever earned was another reminder that I would never measure up to my sister." There was one year, when I was 16, that I looked forward to my birthday more than ever. For weeks beforehand, I had hinted to my mom that all I wanted was a small celebration, just the family together, a cake, and a few candles. I pictured us sitting around the table, singing, smiling, sharing a simple moment that would belong to me. But when the day finally came, my parents decided instead to drive 6 hours to San Francisco to attend an academic gala honoring Vanessa. I stayed home alone with a store-bought cake, the kind hastily picked up from the supermarket, and to make it worse, they had even printed my name wrong on it. Natalia. I sat there blowing out the candles by myself, the ticking of the clock echoing in the silence, forcing down each overly sweet bite that seemed to choke in my throat. That feeling of being forgotten, pushed aside like an unnecessary decoration, never left me. Then came the day I received my acceptance letter from UCLA. It was the fruit of years of relentless studying, late nights, balancing part-time jobs and coursework. I ran breathlessly into the living room, clutching that thin envelope with trembling hands, desperate for just a spark of pride from my parents. My father glanced at it once before saying, "Stanford is what's really worth bragging about. Vanessa got into Stanford, that's an achievement." My mother sighed and added, "Los Angeles is too far. Why didn't you pick a school closer to home, something more convenient for the family?" The one word of praise I longed for never came. In their eyes, my success was nothing more than a faint shadow trailing behind Vanessa's brilliance. And so, as I lay in the hospital, all of it rushing back to me, I understood that the abandonment I felt today wasn't some shocking betrayal. It was simply the continuation of a story I had lived since childhood. The story of a hardworking daughter rendered invisible, growing up under the blinding glow of her golden girl sister. I had trained myself to accept being overlooked, but never had the pain been so sharp, so unbearable, as it was now, when I needed my family's hand the most and they were nowhere to be found. Inside me, that sense of inadequacy had carved itself deep, shaping into a belief that I would never be enough. And perhaps it was that very wound that had drained me to the point of collapsing on the day meant to be my triumph. I had pushed myself beyond my limits to prove my worth, but the recognition I craved from my family, it was something I would never receive. There was a year, when I was 16, that I looked forward to my birthday more than ever before. For weeks, I had been dropping gentle hints to my mom that all I wanted was a small party, just the family together, a cake, and a few candles. I imagined us sitting around the table, singing, celebrating, sharing a simple moment that would be mine. But as the day approached, my parents decided instead to drive 6 hours to San Francisco to attend an academic award gala for Vanessa. I stayed home alone, staring at a supermarket cake hastily bought at the last minute, the kind that still had my name misprinted as Natalia. I sat there, blowing out the candles in silence, the ticking of the clock filling the room, forcing down each sweet bite that stuck in my throat. That feeling of being forgotten, of being pushed aside like an unnecessary ornament, has never left me. Then came the day I received my acceptance letter from UCLA. It was the result of years of relentless effort, long nights of studying, balancing shifts at part-time jobs, scraping by just to keep going. I rushed into the living room, clutching the thin envelope with trembling hands, praying for just one spark of pride in their eyes. My father barely glanced at it before saying, "Stanford is what's really worth bragging about. Vanessa got into Stanford, that's an achievement." My mother sighed, adding, "Los Angeles is too far. Why didn't you pick a school closer to home, something more convenient for the family?" The praise I longed for never came. In their eyes, my accomplishment was still nothing more than a shadow trailing behind Vanessa's brilliance. And so, as I sat in that hospital room, all those memories returning, I realized the abandonment I felt now wasn't some shocking new wound. It was just the continuation of a story that had shaped my entire childhood. The story of a hardworking daughter rendered invisible, always overshadowed by her golden sister. I had trained myself to accept being overlooked, but never had the pain been so raw, so unbearable, as it was in this moment when I needed a family's hand the most, and they were nowhere to be found. Deep inside, that sense of inadequacy had carved itself into me, hardened into a belief that I would never be enough. And maybe, that very wound was what had drained me to the point of collapsing on the most important day of my life. I had given everything to prove myself, but the recognition I so desperately wanted from my family, perhaps it was something I would never receive. My breathing grew heavy, my throat tightening. I scrolled down and saw more photos in the album. Vanessa had posted one after another. The whole family dining in an elegant restaurant on the Champs-Élysées, snapping selfies along the Seine, the children laughing as they clutched balloons at Disneyland Paris. Beneath each picture were dozens of comments from relatives and friends. "Beautiful family. So happy to see you all together. Paris suits you so well." Even one of my mother's old friends wrote, "Finally, the perfect family trip without any stress." I couldn't take it anymore. My fingers went limp, and the phone slipped from my hand onto the bed, the screen going dark with a soft thud. A shiver ran through me, my whole body trembling. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the images wouldn't leave my parents, my sister, my niece and nephew all smiling radiantly, as if I had never even existed. The doctor's hesitant words from yesterday echoed in my head. "We called your parents. They said they would come, but..." Now I understood. The reason they hadn't come wasn't work, and it wasn't traffic. It was because they had boarded a plane to Europe, off on a lavish vacation. When I collapsed on stage, they were stepping off a flight in Paris. When I was unconscious on a stretcher, they were wheeling their suitcases into a 5-star hotel. And when I woke with an IV needle in my arm, they were raising champagne glasses under the lights of the Eiffel Tower. A hot tear slid down my face, soaking into the pillow. I bit my lip hard, trying to swallow, but my throat was locked. In that moment, every childhood wound came rushing back. The forgotten birthday, the dismissed awards, the day my UCLA acceptance was brushed aside. I thought I had grown used to being overlooked. But now, it wasn't just neglect. They weren't only abandoning me, they were openly celebrating a perfect life without me. Rachel came back into the room, carrying a bag of food from the cafeteria. She froze when she saw my tear-streaked face and the phone lying beside me. "Natalie, what happened?" she asked in alarm. I couldn't answer right away, my body trembling as I pointed to the screen. Rachel picked up the phone, opened the photo, and in seconds I saw her eyes darken, her face tightening with anger. She set the phone down hard on the table, her voice choked but firm. "They're cruel. You don't deserve this." That was all it took for me to break. A sob burst out of me, raw and uncontrollable, filling the sterile hospital room. Rachel sat down quickly, wrapping her arms around me, letting me bury my face into her shoulder, my tears soaking through her shirt. She didn't say another word. She just stayed there, steady and solid, like a wall I could finally lean against. In that moment, a brutal truth settled inside me. The family I had always longed for never truly saw me as part of them. To them, I was nothing more than a shadow, a burden they were relieved to be rid of. And right then, I began to understand that if I wanted to survive, I had to learn to find my worth elsewhere, not by begging for love from people who would never give it. That afternoon, as the sunlight outside the window shifted into deep orange, my hospital door opened quietly. A woman in her 40s walked in, her figure neat, her dark hair tied in a high bun, a white coat draped over her shoulders. On the name tag pinned to her chest, I read the words, Dr. Chen, Neurology. She was followed by a nurse carrying a thick file, her face serious but her eyes gentle, as if she was far too familiar with the task of delivering bad news. "Hello, Natalie," Dr. Chen began, pulling a chair up to sit beside my bed. "We have the results of your MRI and several other tests. I'd like to explain them to you clearly." I swallowed hard, my heart racing. From the corner of the room, Rachel stood and came closer, resting her warm hand over mine. "You're not alone," she whispered. Dr. Chen opened the file and pointed to a black and white scan, the outlines of my brain starkly displayed. I stared at the film, but all I could make out were faint white spots. She gestured toward a pale circular area, her voice steady. "Here, we found a small mass. It isn't cancerous. Most likely, it's a meningioma, a benign tumor growing from the membranes around the brain. But the problem is its location. It's pressing against a nerve, which explains your symptoms. The persistent headaches, dizziness, fatigue, and, ultimately, your collapse." A chill spread through my entire body. My ears rang, and the beeping of the heart monitor suddenly felt deafening. "A tumor?" I stammered, my throat dry as dust. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "Yes. The good news is we caught it early. The bad news is, if left untreated, it will continue to grow, leading to complications. Blurred vision, seizures, even life-threatening consequences. The most effective treatment is surgical removal." My mouth fell open, my eyes locked on her, silently pleading for her to say I only needed medication, maybe just rest. But no such words came. The word surgery thundered in my ears like a bolt of lightning. Rachel tightened her grip on my hand. I trembled. "Soon? How soon?" I whispered. "Doctor." Chen hesitated before answering. "Preferably within the next 1 to 2 weeks. We don't recommend delaying." I drew in a shaky breath, fighting the urge to break down. Brain surgery at 24, when I should be thinking about my first job after graduation, about new beginnings. Instead, I was facing an operating table, scalpels, and risks so terrifying they made me shiver just hearing them spoken aloud. As if to deepen the blow, Dr. Chen went on. "The cost of surgery and post-operative care is quite high. Because the tumor is located so close to the central nerves, we'll need a specialized team and advanced equipment. I know this isn't easy to hear, but you need to understand clearly. The hospital has already contacted your insurance company, but your current plan will only cover a portion. The remaining balance is substantial." My stomach dropped into a hollow void. Substantial. How much? I asked, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The nurse glanced at me, then set a printed estimate on the table beside the bed. I looked down at the figure, and my vision went dark. $85,000. A number capable of crushing any newly graduated student, especially one who had worked herself to exhaustion just to pay off tuition. My lips split as I bit down too hard. I don't have that kind of money. I just finished paying my tuition." I. I. My voice broke, collapsing into ragged sobs. Dr. Chen placed a hand gently on my shoulder, her voice softening. I know this is difficult news to accept, but Natalie, your health has to come first. We can discuss financial aid options, hospital grants, support programs, but the final decision must come from you. You may want to consider calling your family. A bitter laugh escaped me, harsh and hollow in the sterile room. Call my family? My family was in Paris, raising champagne glasses, smiling under the lights of the Eiffel Tower. They weren't there when I collapsed, and they didn't pick up when I called. I thought of the caption under yesterday's photo. Family trip in Paris finally, no stress, no drama. In those words, I was the drama they were so relieved to leave behind. How could I possibly find the courage to call and beg them now? After the doctor left, Rachel pulled her chair close and wrapped her arms around me. Natalie, you're going to get through this. I'll be here with you. We'll find a way. I leaned my head against her shoulder as the tears poured down like a river. My voice came out in a whisper. Rachel, I don't have anyone else to lean on. My parents won't answer, Vanessa stays silent, and now, when I need them the most, they've disappeared. End quote. Rachel didn't answer right away. She simply stroked my hair gently, letting me cry, letting the tears wash away all the layers of restraint I had held onto these past few days. Inside my chest, a vast emptiness spread, despair surging like a tide. I didn't know where I would find the strength to step onto an operating table. I didn't know if I still had enough worth to fight when even the people closest to me had abandoned me. And yet, deep in that despair, a small glimmer of light appeared. A memory surfaced, a warm, steady voice, so different from my father's. My grandfather, Howard, the only one in the family who had ever truly seen me as a person. The man who spent hours teaching me how to play chess, who took me fishing at dawn, who wrote me birthday cards when my parents forgot the date. A single thought passed through me, perhaps he was the only anchor I still had. I lifted my head, eyes red and swollen, and whispered to Rachel, I need to call my grandpa. That evening, after Rachel left the room to pick up some food, I lay alone, staring at the ceiling. My mind spinning with the number $85,000 and the words, brain surgery, echoing like a hammer in my chest. My trembling hand gripped the phone, my thumb scrolling through my contacts. Familiar names appeared, Dad, Mom, Vanessa. I swiped past them, each one leaving a bitter, hollow ache. I knew all I would get were long unanswered rings and cold voicemail greetings. Then my eyes stopped on a name I hadn't dialed in a very long time. Grandpa Howard. I hesitated for a few seconds, drew in a deep breath, then pressed the call button. The line rang 3 times before his voice came through hoarse, slow, but filled with warmth. Natalie? Is that really you? My God, I just heard from one of your mother's friends that you collapsed at your graduation. Where are you? Are you all right? Just the sound of his voice brought my tears spilling over. I broke down, my words choked and broken. Grandpa, I'm at UCLA Medical Center. They said there's a tumor in my brain. I need surgery soon, but I don't have the money. I don't know what to do. On the other end of the line, a heavy silence hung for a moment. Then I heard him draw in a long, trembling breath. Stay on the phone, Natalie. I'm coming right now. You are not to worry about a thing, do you hear me? I'll drive up to Los Angeles tonight. His voice was firm, without a trace of hesitation. Less than 2 hours later, while I was still sinking into exhaustion, the hospital door opened. My grandfather, Howard, stepped in. He looked thinner than the last time I had seen him, his hair a snowy white, but his eyes still sharp and unwavering. The moment he saw me, he hurried to my bedside and clasped my hand tightly. Natalie, my Katie girl, he called me by the childhood nickname only he used. I'm here now. God, you've grown so thin. Why didn't you tell me sooner? My throat constricted, tears streaming again. I didn't want to trouble you. I thought Mom and Dad would take care of me, but I let the words trail off, but he seemed to understand everything already. His eyes darkened, and behind them a quiet fury stirred. Rachel, who had just returned, quickly explained my condition to him and how I had been working day and night to pay off my tuition. At that, my grandfather spun toward me, his face paling with shock. "What? You mean you've been paying for your own tuition? But I sent the money to your parents. From your very first year, I transferred enough to cover all 4 years. Why on earth have you been working yourself to the bone?" My eyes widened, my heart stopping in my chest. "Grandpa, what did you just say?" I never saw a single dollar. I had to take out student loans and work to pay everything off. He gripped my hand tighter, his shoulders trembling with rage. "My God, so they never told you?" "I trusted them with that money. It wasn't a small amount, Natalie, it was enough to cover all your tuition. And now I find out, they stole it, and left you to destroy your health, to grind yourself down to nothing." I sat frozen, hollow inside, like I had been dropped into a bottomless pit. All this time, 4 long years, I had traded away my health, my youth, even my dreams, just because my parents, the very people who were supposed to protect me, had deceived me. Every sleepless night at the coffee shop, every hour coding through exhaustion, every tear shed over tuition bills stacking up. All of it had been for nothing. The money had been there all along, blocked only by my parents' selfishness. Grandpa shot up from his chair, pulling his phone from his pocket. "This will not be left alone." He punched in a number and called my father directly. The line rang for a few seconds before connecting. My father's voice came through, flustered, muffled by background noise. He sounded like he was at a restaurant. "Hello, Dad? What is it?" "I'm busy." "Busy?" Grandpa's voice thundered, shaking me to the core. "Busy spending my money on a European vacation while your youngest daughter lies in a hospital bed with a brain tumor?" On the other end, my father stammered, fumbling for words, then tried to steady his tone. "Dad, it's not like that. We just borrowed a little of the money for a family trip." "Natalie, she's fine, isn't she?" "Fine?" Grandpa nearly roared. "She collapsed at her graduation. The doctors are calling for brain surgery, and you say she's fine? And the money I sent for her tuition, where is it? Do you have the courage to answer that?" I heard my mother's voice cut in, faint, hesitant, yet still trying to justify. "Dad, we only thought." Vanessa needed support too. She has a family now, so many responsibilities, and Natalie, she's strong, she can take care of herself. "Enough." Grandpa's voice cracked, trembling with fury but razor sharp. "You deceived me. You stole what belonged to Natalie. You are unworthy of being her parents." Before they could offer another excuse, he cut them off. "From this moment, I'm shutting down every account I authorized you to use. I'll make sure Natalie gets her care and her surgery. As for your luxury vacation, you can deal with that on your own." He ended the call, his hands shaking but his eyes blazing. Pulling out his wallet and his backup phone, he tapped quickly on the screen. "I've just frozen all their international cards. Right there in Paris, they'll learn what consequences feel like." I looked at him, stunned, wounded, yet with a strange sense of relief spreading through me. After all these years, someone in my family was finally standing up for me, speaking out for me. But at the same time, the truth cut deep, like a blade straight through my heart. My parents hadn't only abandoned me, they had stolen what was meant for me, all to indulge Vanessa and her family's luxury. I lay there silently, tears streaming down my cheeks, while Grandpa held my hand tightly and whispered, "Natalie, you don't have to be alone anymore. I'll take care of you. We'll face this together." No, Isra. In that moment, in the sterile cold of the hospital room, I felt, for the very first time, the embrace of true family. And for the first time, I understood, no matter how painful, the truth had freed me from the illusions that had bound me all my life. That night, after Grandpa stepped out to meet with the doctors and discuss the surgery, I lay alone under the cold white glow of the hospital lights. On the bedside table, my phone suddenly buzzed, its screen flashing like an erratic heartbeat. I glanced over and froze. The display showed 12 missed calls from Dad. Below that, 9 from Mom. 6 from Vanessa. Before I could even reach for it, the phone buzzed again, the ringtone slicing through the silence of the room. My father's name glared across the screen. I let it ring. My fingers curled back, as if touching it would burn me. When the call ended, it rang again seconds later this time. Mom. My throat tightened, my heart racing, but still, I let it go. 10 minutes later, when the ringing finally stopped, a flood of text messages poured in. I didn't want to look, but the blinking light nagged at me, relentless. My trembling hand reached for the phone, my thumb brushing across the glass. The first message was from Dad. What did you tell Grandpa? Why did you ruin the whole family's trip? We're stuck in Paris, our cards aren't working. This is your fault, Natalie. I sat there frozen, my chest caving in as if a fist had clamped around my heart. Another notification lit up, this time from Mom. You're so selfish, how could you do this? Vanessa and the kids are here, they need money for daily expenses. Do you even realize what you've caused? My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I scrolled down, and there it was, a message from Vanessa. Can you stop ruining everyone else's life for once? Grandpa is old, he shouldn't be stressed with this nonsense. You've embarrassed the whole family. I gasped for air, my hand falling limp at my side. I let the phone slip onto the mattress, its screen still glowing, more notifications pouring in like a relentless storm. Every second brought another call. For the first time in my life, they truly needed me. But the reason was painfully clear. It wasn't because they cared about my health or my life. It was because I had suddenly become the name attached to the money they had just lost. I closed my eyes, letting the shrill ring echo inside my skull. Tears spilled over, but they weren't born of simple hurt. They carried bitterness, mingled with a strange clarity, like a curtain finally ripped away, revealing the truth behind everything I had once clung to. For years I had convinced myself that, deep down, my parents still loved me, that they simply didn't know how to show it. I told myself that if I ever truly needed them, they would come. But now, as I lay in a hospital bed facing brain surgery and staggering medical costs, they had remained silent. And only when their credit cards were frozen, when their lavish vacation in Paris was interrupted, did they transform into relentless callers, flooding my phone like tormentors. The phone kept flashing, buzzing violently against the sheets. 23 missed calls, 38, then 54. I didn't pick up. I didn't want to hear another word of blame. Inside me, a heavy silence spread, smothering every trace of pain. Rachel stepped into the room, holding a cup of hot coffee. Her eyes narrowed when she saw my phone screen flashing. Is it them? She asked. I nodded faintly, my voice caught in my throat. Rachel sighed and set the cup on the table. Don't answer, they don't deserve it. What you need now is rest, not their poison. I looked at Rachel, my lips trembling. They've never needed me, Rachel. Never. Not until now, when their cards stopped working. Now they call like mad. I really don't have anything left to hold on to. All. Rachel sat down beside me, wrapping her arm around my shoulder. No, Natalie. You still have me. You still have your grandfather. Real family are the people who choose to stand beside you when you're at your weakest, not the ones who only come running when they've lost something of their own. The phone lit up again, another 65 missed calls, my voicemail overflowing with threats and blame. I stared at the screen for a moment, then slowly powered the device off. The room fell into silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. And in that silence, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I no longer expected my parents to save me. And for the first time, I felt a strange kind of freedom in the pain, because finally, the truth was undeniable. After a long night with my phone switched off, I managed to sleep a few fitful hours, haunted by nightmares. When the morning light slipped into the room, I turned it back on, intending only to check the time. Immediately the screen exploded with notifications, swarming like a hive of angry bees. 112 missed calls, 48 unread messages. My chest tightened, but my hand stayed steady as I scrolled through. The newest notification was a video call from my father. I sat frozen for a long moment, my breath shallow. Refusing to hide in silence any longer, I decided I had to face them, not for their sake, but for mine. I pressed accept. Instantly, my father's face filled the screen, Michael, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Behind him, I saw my mother, Linda, hovering uncertainly, and Vanessa beside him, arms crossed, her expression like ice. The muffled sounds of a luxury hotel carried through, the warm golden light reflecting off polished walls behind them. All that opulence stood in brutal contrast to the sterile white of my hospital room. At last, you decided to answer. My father growled, his jaw tight with fury. What did you say to Grandpa? Why did you make him so angry? Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused this family? The cards are frozen, we can't pay for the hotel, we can't even buy tickets home. What do you think you're doing, Natalie? I drew in a long breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. I didn't do anything. I only told the truth. The truth is, when I collapsed on stage at my graduation, where were you? When the doctors called with an emergency, what were you doing? You were raising wine glasses in Paris, enjoying a vacation funded by the money Grandpa sent for my tuition. My mother's face paled, her voice trembling with anger. Natalie, don't speak nonsense. We only borrowed that money. Vanessa has a family now, with responsibilities. You're young, you can work and pay things off. I cut her off, my tone sharp as glass. Borrowed? For 4 years I destroyed my health, working from morning until midnight, juggling classes and debt. I collapsed in a coffee shop, and then again at my graduation, because I was worn to the bone. All because the money Grandpa entrusted to you vanished, turned into vacations and glossy, perfect family photos on social media. You call that borrowing? Vanessa shot up, her voice dripping with mockery. You always play the victim. You think you're the only one who's ever struggled? Do you have any idea what our parents have sacrificed to maintain the family's image? You're selfish, Natalie. You've turned Grandpa against all of us, and now you're trying to drag the whole family's name through the mud just to get pity? I stared straight into the screen, my eyes unnervingly dry. Selfish? When I'm lying in a hospital bed, facing brain surgery alone, while the rest of you are dressed in luxury coats posing under the Eiffel Tower? I'm selfish for wanting my parents by my side on the most important day of my life? I'm selfish for hoping for one word of concern instead of being branded as drama in your captions? If that's selfish, then I accept it. My father slammed his hand against the table, his voice erupting into a roar. You don't understand anything, you've ruined everything. You made Grandpa furious, you've disgraced the family. From the day you were born, you've done nothing but cause trouble. I let out a faint laugh, bitter yet strangely calm. No, Dad, I don't see myself as trouble anymore. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I was worthy, but all I ever got in return were comparisons to Vanessa, abandonment over and over again. I waited for your recognition until I nearly destroyed myself. But starting today, I'm done waiting. At that moment, Grandpa Howard, who had been standing beside me in the hospital room, stepped forward, resting his hand firmly on my shoulder. His aged face was steady, his voice clear and unwavering as it rang through the call. I've seen enough. Natalie hasn't ruined anything. You destroyed this family yourselves, with your greed and blind favoritism. From this moment on, I will personally take care of Natalie and give her the support she deserves. Stop blaming her for your failures. On the screen, I saw my father's face flush purple with rage, my mother lowering her head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Vanessa pressed her lips tight, her glare burning with resentment, but she had no words left. None of them could deny the truth Grandpa had just spoken. I sat there, my heartbeat slowing, feeling as if a crushing weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I looked at them one last time, my voice even and resolute. I will go through with the surgery, with Grandpa and the people who truly care for me by my side. You don't need to call me anymore. I'm old enough to understand now love isn't something you can beg from a family that only cares about its own gain. From this day forward, I'll live without needing your approval. I pressed the button and ended the call. The screen went black, leaving only my reflection, blurred by tear-filled eyes. Yet, strangely, what lingered inside me was not emptiness, not anger, but a relief deeper than anything I had ever known. I turned my head and met Grandpa's steady gaze. He nodded slowly, his hand gripping mine with unwavering strength. Beside him, Rachel stood with a faint smile, her eyes glowing with pride. For the first time in years, I felt truly freed, cut loose from the invisible rope that had tied me to a family that never once acknowledged my worth. I no longer needed to prove anything. I had my answer now, and I had found where I truly belonged. The day of surgery came faster than I expected. On a clear Los Angeles morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital blinds, painting long streaks of gold across the white tile floor. I lay in bed, my hands trembling as nurses came in with the final preparations. Dr. Chen explained carefully. The surgery would last several hours. They would open the skull, carefully remove the tumor pressed against my central nerves, then close with specialized grafts. With every word, the world seemed to shrink into a tight spiral, leaving no room to breathe. A nurse placed a consent form in front of me, pointing to the bold print, next of kin, guardian signature. The empty line carved into me like a blade. If this had been any ordinary family, my parents would have been the first to step forward, fighting over the chance to sign, to shoulder responsibility. But here, I knew it wouldn't be them. They were still in Paris, likely too busy scrambling now that their credit cards were frozen. Before that emptiness could swallow me whole, a firm hand rested on my shoulder. Grandpa Howard leaned in, his eyes steady and resolute. "Give it to me," he said firmly. He took the pen, his handwriting trembling but decisive as he signed his name. Beside him, Rachel stepped forward, her voice quiet but certain. "I'll sign too, if you need someone listed as the direct contact." The nurse nodded, pointing to the line marked emergency contact. Rachel signed her name, her pen strokes soft yet filled with determination. I stared at those two signatures, and my eyes blurred with tears. Not my parents, but two people who were willing to stand with me as I stepped into the most dangerous moment of my life. The surgery was scheduled for that very morning. As they wheeled my bed down the long corridor, the fluorescent lights glaring overhead, I clung tightly to my grandfather's hand. He leaned close, whispering, "Natalie, you are the strongest girl I've ever known. You'll get through this, and when you open your eyes, I'll be right here." On the other side, Rachel's small hand gripped mine firmly, her eyes shining with an encouraging smile. "I'll be waiting for you. You are not alone." The operating room doors swung open, and the sharp smell of antiseptic hit me like a wave. Figures in green scrubs and masks moved quickly around the room, checking machines, preparing trays of instruments that gleamed cold under the lights. "Doctor." Chen's voice rose above the steady hum, calm and precise. "Vitals stable, prepare anesthesia." A nurse gently lowered an oxygen mask onto my face, instructing me to breathe deeply. The icy air filled my lungs, and my vision blurred. In the final moment before darkness took me, I thought I heard Rachel's voice echo softly. "You're not alone, Natalie." I don't know how much time passed. In the haze of anesthesia, sometimes it felt like I was plummeting into an endless black pit, other times like faint glimmers of light flickered on the surface of a lake just out of reach. I caught fleeting sounds, surgical instruments clinking, doctors exchanging brisk words, and then silence swallowed everything. When I finally woke, the first sensation was a dull ache spreading across my skull, like thousands of needles pricking at once. I forced my eyes open, the world swimming in a blur. Slowly, the blinding white light sharpened into the familiar ceiling of the hospital room. The steady beeping of the monitor filled the air, mingled with the low murmur of nurses nearby. I blinked again, and this time my gaze landed on two faces at my bedside. Grandpa Howard, his hair pure white, deep shadows under his eyes from staying awake through the long hours of surgery, was leaning forward, clutching my hand tightly. On the other side was Rachel, tear stains still etched on her cheeks, but her eyes glowing with relief as she smiled at me. "You're safe now, Natalie," Grandpa whispered, his voice trembling but full of release. Rachel leaned in close, her whisper breaking with emotion. You scared me half to death, but you made it. You were never alone. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I tried to move my lips, my voice hoarse and broken, but a few words still slipped out. I'm still alive? Grandpa nodded again and again, his voice breaking with relief. The surgery was a success, the tumor has been removed, and just as the doctors predicted, it was benign. You'll recover, Natalie. All you need now is time. I am Tao. A shaky breath escaped me, my eyes blurring with fresh tears. In that instant, all the physical pain seemed to fade, replaced by a simple yet overwhelming joy. I hadn't faced the darkness alone. The faces waiting for me when I opened my eyes were not my parents, not Vanessa, they were Grandpa and Rachel. In the days that followed, they stayed by my side as I healed. Every morning, Grandpa sat in the chair by my bed, reading the newspaper, glancing up now and then with a soft smile as he reminded me to sip water. Rachel brought me small meals, brewed herbal tea to help me sleep. At night, when the pain kept me restless, they took turns holding my hand, reading a few pages from a book to soothe me. Those small, ordinary gestures became medicine far more powerful than anything prescribed, and in the quiet of my heart, I realized a truth I had longed for all my life. Family is not defined by blood, but by the people who choose to stand beside you when you fall. I had finally found my real family, not in the lavish vacations of my parents, but here in this simple hospital room, with an aging grandfather and a friend bound not by blood, but by love. I smiled faintly, my eyelids fluttering closed as I whispered just loud enough for them both to hear. I'm not alone, and I never knew this feeling could be so precious. At the same moment, Grandpa and Rachel tightened their grip on my hands, their eyes shining in the cold white light of the hospital. In that instant, I knew I had stepped into a new chapter of my life, one where I no longer needed to wait for love from those who would never give it. I had the people who stood beside me in my weakest moments, and that alone was everything. The weeks of recovery after surgery became a long, patient journey. Each day I learned to rise again, to take small steps along the hospital corridor, to accept the scar on my head as a new part of my body. Dr. Chen visited often, her warm smile steady and encouraging. Natalie, you're making progress every day. Don't rush, go slow, but go steady. At my side, Grandpa and Rachel never left. They weren't just caretakers, they were my strength, reminding me that I could keep moving forward. When I was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, Grandpa made a gentle suggestion. Natalie, come back with me to La Jolla. The air is fresh, the sea is calm, and there's a cabin I've kept for years. It will be the perfect place for you to heal and maybe the place where you begin again. I hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. I knew returning to the old house in San Diego would only reopen scars, but La Jolla, where I had once spent peaceful summers with Grandpa, felt like the chance for a new beginning. After the long drive, the seaside cabin appeared, exactly as it had lived in my memory. Gray shingles on the roof, a wooden porch, wide windows looking out onto the endless blue of the ocean. The waves rolled in with a soothing rhythm, the scent of salt lingering in the breeze. Standing on the porch, I drew a deep breath, the air filling me with the sense that I had come home to a place of safety. In the little kitchen, Grandpa brewed me a cup of peppermint tea and set it gently before me. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of everything he had witnessed. Natalie, I know you've carried more than your share of pain. But from now on, you don't need to look back. You can finally begin to live for yourself. I lifted my head and saw Grandpa place a thick envelope on the table. He slid it toward me, his eyes firm yet gentle. This is money I've set aside. At first, I intended to transfer it to your parents to take care of you, but now I know the only person worthy of managing it is you. Use it to do what you truly want. I opened the envelope and found a stack of bank checks inside. My chest tightened, my eyes burning. Grandpa, I can't, but he shook his head. This isn't charity. This is trust. I believe you'll know what to do. In the nights that followed, I sat on the porch of the cabin, listening to the waves and thinking about the future. I remembered the kids who used to come into the cafe where I worked, asking me for help with math homework or showing me little robots they were trying to build. I remembered the joy in their eyes when they finally understood something new. Slowly, an idea began to take shape, an online education platform that would teach programming while encouraging creative thinking for high school students. I wanted to create the kind of tool I had once wished for when I was young, a place that could make me feel valued, instead of constantly compared. One evening, as the sunset painted the sea red, I shared the idea with Rachel. She listened closely, her eyes lighting up. "Natalie, that's brilliant, and if you want, I'll help you build it. I'm not the coder you are, but I have project management and organizational skills. We could complement each other." I took Rachel's hand, and for the first time in years, I felt I didn't have to carry everything alone. We started with small steps. Using the funds Grandpa had given me, I bought servers and hired a small group of bright young students from UCLA to join the project. Rachel took charge of outreach, connecting with local schools, persuading teachers to pilot the software. Every day, the little seaside cabin transformed more and more into an improvised office. The kitchen table covered in laptops, a whiteboard propped in the living room, late-night work sessions buzzing with energy and purpose. In the very first month, we launched a trial version at a high school in La Jolla. More than 30 students signed up. I went there myself to observe, and when I saw the kids rushing over, eager to show me their very first lines of code, my heart nearly burst. One shy boy said softly, "Miss Natalie, this is the first time coding has ever felt as fun as playing a game." I smiled, and a pride unlike anything I had ever known swelled inside me. Word spread quickly. Soon, other teachers in the area began reaching out. By the third month, we had over 200 active accounts. Rachel built an official website, while I worked day and night to improve the features. Grandpa often sat in the corner of the room, watching us with a smile. "You kids remind me of when I built my first company," he said once, his eyes glimmering. "This energy, this fire, that's what youth is all about." Every evening, when the work slowed down, I would walk to the shoreline, watching the waves crash endlessly into the sand. And it struck me that I had truly stepped into another chapter of life, no longer waiting for my parents to call my name, no longer craving their praise. I had found a path where I could write my own name into the canvas of the world. And when I thought back on everything I had endured, I didn't feel as bitter as before. Because without those wounds, I might never have learned to treasure the value of building something with my own hands together with those who genuinely believed in me. Now, I no longer defined myself through the eyes of my parents or the shadow of Vanessa. I defined myself through the smiles of the students learning from my program, through the bond I shared with Rachel, and, above all, through the unwavering trust Grandpa had placed in me. A new life had begun. Not a perfect life, but a real one, a life where I could live by my true worth, surrounded by love from those who chose to stay, not from those who only remembered me when it served their needs. Sunset in La Jolla always seemed to linger, as if the sky itself was reluctant to let go of the day's gentle light. Before me stretched a horizon brushed with gold, orange, and violet, blending together into a romantic canvas that seemed to spill endlessly into the sea. The waves rolled in, their white crests tumbling onto the shore before dissolving into soft foam, the murmuring of the ocean like a lullaby soothing my soul. I sat on the wooden porch of the cabin, a light blanket draped over my shoulders, with Grandpa Howard on one side and Rachel on the other. 3 people, 3 generations, and yet, strangely, I had never felt such a sense of belonging. Grandpa lifted his cup of tea, sipping slowly, his eyes reflecting the last glow of the sun. Rachel rested her chin on her knees, gazing at the sea with bright, thoughtful eyes, her light brown hair drifting gently in the breeze. I sat in silence, my chest swelling with something new, something rare, peace. No phones buzzing relentlessly. No cold accusations, no bitter comparisons. Only the waves, the wind, and 2 people who sat beside me wholeheartedly. My thoughts wandered back across the road I had traveled. From the moment I collapsed on stage at graduation, to the lonely nights in the hospital, to the sting of seeing that Paris photo captioned, "No drama." I had once believed those wounds would follow me forever. But then, through the surgery, through Grandpa, through Rachel, I had walked out of that darkness. I realized there are ties not worth holding on to. Some bonds, no matter how much we call them family, do nothing but make us bleed. Grandpa turned to me, his eyes soft and kind. "Natalie, looking at you now, I see the little girl who used to sit by the lake with me, fishing. Back then, you always asked, 'Grandpa, am I good enough?' Today, I want to tell you once more, you're not only good enough, you are stronger and braver than anyone I've ever known." His voice trembled, but every word rang with certainty. I squeezed his wrinkled hand, my eyes filling with tears once again. Rachel smiled gently, her voice as light as the breeze. "You don't have to prove anything anymore, Natalie. I've watched you fight every single day. Our startup is growing, children are learning and discovering joy through your program. That is the clearest proof that you have worth, that you've rewritten your story." I nodded, breathing in the salty air of the sea. A great wave crashed against the rocks, spraying white foam high into the sky, like an ovation from nature itself. In that moment, I heard my own heart clearly. My voice came out quiet, yet it seemed to echo in the stillness. Family isn't blood. Family is the people who choose to stay, who hold your hand when you fall. And I've finally found my real family. Grandpa's grip tightened around my hand, and Rachel leaned her head gently against my shoulder. The three of us sat there in silence, but not one of us felt empty. We simply watched the sun sink slowly into the sea, letting the last golden light touch our hair and paint the ripples of the waves. Inside me, a new chapter had opened. I knew there would still be challenges ahead. A young startup to grow, a body to keep healing, a life that would never be without hardship. But I had a foundation now, a family chosen, not imposed. I had Grandpa, who gave me trust when everyone else abandoned me. I had Rachel, a loyal and courageous companion. And most importantly, I had myself, not a Natalie desperate for recognition, but one determined to create value for herself and for others. When the sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon, I smiled. Not the smile I once wore to hide pain, but a smile of true peace, a signal of a new life full of hope. I had walked through the darkness, only to discover my own light. And this time, I knew with certainty that light would never be eclipsed again. If you've ever been hurt by your own family, remember this: your worth is never defined by neglect or harsh comparisons. True family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to stand by you, who hold your hand when you're at your weakest. No matter how many scars the past has left, you still have the power to rewrite your own story. Believe that you are worthy of love, worthy of happiness, and that the light you discover within yourself will never again be overshadowed.